I never imagined I would find myself seated in a courtroom, designated by the impersonal term plaintiff, compelled to narrate every particular of a life that the man positioned across from me was actively attempting to nullify. On the opposite side of the table sat Nathan, the individual who had once pledged to cherish me eternally. With his legs crossed, attired in a dark blue suit, and his eyes devoid of any discernible emotion, he emitted a soft chuckle and leaned over to murmur something into the ear of the young woman beside him. She laughed, a brief, derisive sound that caused me to clutch the file in my hands more tightly, as if it represented the final fragment of dignity I possessed. My name is Isabella. 7 years prior, I relinquished my graphic design position at a media company to assist Nathan in launching a business. At that time, he possessed nothing but an idea and boundless self-assurance. We leased an old garage and converted it into our initial office. I managed everything, designing the emblem, cultivating the client roster, overseeing the financial records, and even personally delivering orders because he was purportedly too occupied with building relationships. Yet, this morning in court, his legal representative stood, adjusted his collar, and commenced his narrative as though I were merely a phantom subsisting on my ex-husband's achievements. "Your Honor," he declared with pointed emphasis, "Mrs. Isabella played no part in the development of green tech. Financial records indicate she held no official capacity, made no monetary contributions, and was, in essence, a homemaker." I yearned to interject, to refute his assertions. But before I could articulate my first sentence, the judge interrupted me. "Please respond to the question directly." "Madam," he stated without even glancing at me, his gaze still fixed on his electronic tablet. I suppressed the words I had rehearsed for a week, the statements I believed would finally make someone comprehend, which suddenly felt inconsequential. And Nathan. He simply remained there, leaning back in his chair, smirking. When it was his turn, he spoke with incredible self-assurance. "I do not wish to speak negatively of anyone, but the truth is, Isabella did not manage the business. She remained at home. I constructed everything." He continued, "Now she merely desires a portion because we are undergoing a divorce." A quiet laugh emanated from behind me, likely from one of his new acquaintances, individuals who used to dine in the kitchen where I cooked, now seated behind me, ridiculing my distress. I sat in silence, aware that if I displayed my emotions, they would perceive me differently, in the manner people often regard women who weep in public. I reminded myself not to exhibit weakness, but my heart felt like a stone. What Nathan and his legal counsel were doing was not just discrediting my work. They were fabricating history, erasing me from the formative years filled with exertion and sacrifice. When the court adjourned, I walked out into the corridor, my heels striking against the tile, their sound echoing in the solitude. Nathan stood nearby, laughing with his lawyer and his new girlfriend, the woman in the designer dress, whose glare was sharp enough to penetrate me. "She genuinely believes a few old receipts will alter anything," she remarked loudly, not troubling to lower her voice. I heard it all, every single word. I did not reply. I just clutched my folder more tightly and thought, if the truth is insufficient to make them feel ashamed, then I will ensure it cannot be forgotten, not through anger, but through meticulous preparation. That evening, I sat alone in the small rented apartment I had moved into after vacating the house I had contributed to purchasing. With a cold cup of tea in hand, the dim kitchen light illuminated a table scattered with old invoices, adhesive notes, and a few faded photographs from the early green tech days, back when its name was merely handwritten on a whiteboard. I used to believe none of this would hold legal significance. But now that Nathan was denying my entire involvement in the company's journey, I began to perceive it all from a different perspective. One name suddenly resurfaced in my memory: Claire Robbins. Claire had been a part-time assistant during the initial stages. She assisted me with cutting labels, dispatching mail, and even hand-tagging our first batch of products. I recalled her habit of documenting everything: receipts, handwritten agreements, internal electronic communications. We were close, but she transitioned to a larger firm, and we lost contact. I was uncertain if she even remembered me, but I knew that if anyone had preserved the truth from those early days, it was her. I located Claire on a professional networking site after nearly 2 hours of sifting through old contacts. Her new profile picture was from a technology conference, appearing more polished than before, but she possessed the same careful, diligent eyes. I did not message her immediately. Instead, I composed an email. I did not implore or demand. I simply elucidated that I was attempting to prove I was not the freeloader Nathan alleged, and that if she still possessed any materials, particularly emails or documents that illustrated my role, I would be profoundly grateful to see them. After I dispatched the email, I waited. Each hour passed arduously. Finally, at 11 p.m., I received a reply. Isabella, I still have everything. Meet me tomorrow afternoon. I think. It's time the truth is told. The following day, I drove to a small cafe on the west side of town, just a few buildings from Claire's current workplace. When I entered, she was already seated, a laptop open and a substantial folder beside her. I did not even have an opportunity to speak before she stood, pulled out a chair for me, and stated quietly, "I never thought I'd need these. But he was mistaken to think he could erase you." We sat for over 2 hours. Claire provided me with printed copies of work emails exchanged between me and Nathan, the ones I had typed on the office computer but never retained. There were also old files she had backed up from early budget proposals, detailing my responsibilities, such as sourcing materials and managing orders. Some documents even bore my signature alongside Nathan's on presentation decks sent to initial investors. However, the most impactful item was a handwritten draft of a company ownership agreement I had entirely forgotten. It stipulated 35% for me and 65% for Nathan. We both signed it late one night before the company was legally registered. I still remembered Nathan saying, "Let's just write it down for now. We'll formalize it with a proper contract later." That later never materialized. I looked at Claire, my voice trembling. "Why did you retain all of this?" She leaned back and smiled faintly. "Because I admired you, and I couldn't bear seeing you treated as if you never existed. I brought everything home, scanned each document onto a separate USB drive, and labeled the folder Living Proof. That night, I did not sleep, but not due to fear. For the first time during this ordeal, I felt a sense of hope. Nathan might have removed my name from the company's main entrance, but he could not erase me from its history because someone had preserved it for me. And this time, I was not going to allow anyone to bury it under the label of invisible. Claire advised me to find a lawyer experienced in divorce cases involving disputed business contributions. It took me 3 days to compose myself, list reputable firms in the area, and finally settle on one name that immediately stood out: Elaine Porter. Elaine was not what I had anticipated. She was a few years younger than me, with softly curled hair, thin-rimmed glasses, and a voice that was both calm and firm. Her office was situated in a red brick building in downtown Portland, modestly decorated, yet precise in every detail. I walked in holding the USB drive in that thick folder, containing everything Claire had given me. Ms. Isabella, I've reviewed your preliminary case summary, Elaine said as we sat down. Before we commence, I need to ask, are you prepared to see this through to the end? I did not hesitate. I don't desire pity. I want the truth to be acknowledged. Elaine nodded, her gaze shifting from cautious to focused, like a warrior stepping onto a pre-selected battlefield. We spent the initial few hours examining every piece of evidence, the emails between Nathan and me, the co-signed budgets, everything Claire had provided, especially one email dated June 3rd, 2016, sent by Nathan at midnight after we had secured our first major client. I don't know how you resolved that inventory debacle, but you just saved this company. Without you, Green Tech would probably be defunct by now. Elaine read it, paused, and then said softly, "This one sentence is worth more than anything his lawyer could ever articulate." We began reconstructing a detailed timeline. Every invoice, every old bank transaction, every transfer receipt I had made from my personal account to the company account in the early days was categorized by Elaine. She even engaged a forensic accountant, Patrick Yoon, a specialist in financial analysis for divorce disputes, to start scrutinizing Green Tech's financial records more deeply. A week later, Patrick submitted his preliminary report, and that is when everything transformed. According to the analysis, between 2015 and 2018, there were multiple transactions labeled as external investments, or emergency funding. But the source traced back to my own account, not once, but 9 times, totaling nearly $72,000. This was money I had withdrawn from my personal savings to keep the company solvent during its most challenging years. I used to think, well, what is mine is also my husband's. It turns out, in court, that definition does not apply. Elaine reviewed the report and turned to me. If we can demonstrate that these so-called investments were systematic, and that he deliberately omitted them from the divorce filings, this is not merely a property dispute, it's financial concealment. I sat in silence, overwhelmed. A part of me still wanted to believe Nathan was just selfish, not malicious. But numbers do not deceive. They articulate the truth more clearly than any excuse ever could. We began preparing a rebuttal file. Elaine organized each piece of evidence thank you notes, work emails, invoices, transfer receipts, and most importantly, the handwritten company ownership agreement. We need to transform this into a narrative, a clear timeline with corresponding evidence at each juncture, Elaine stated as she pinned color-coded notes across the whiteboard behind her. And for the first time in months, I no longer felt alone. I learned how to ask the pertinent questions, how to interpret legal clauses, and what it meant to distinguish between formal titles and actual impact in a small business. Elaine did not treat me like a victim. She treated me as a collaborator with a voice in her own case. One afternoon, while reviewing documents, Elaine chuckled softly. "He thought he could eradicate you from everything simply by removing your name from official records. But he left the clearest trail in the last place anyone would look." I raised an eyebrow. Elaine pointed at the closing lines of an email Nathan sent me in 2017 during the hurried preparation for a new product launch. "I couldn't accomplish this without you. You're the backbone of it all, Isabella." You don't refer to someone as the backbone of a company if they were merely sitting at home spending money. I pressed my lips together. Something shifted within me. It was not rage, nor was it triumph. It was a cold, sharp resolve. I would bring the truth into the light, not for retribution, but so I would not be erased from the story I had helped author with my youth. The second hearing commenced on a gray Wednesday morning, but the atmosphere in the courtroom was entirely different from before. I walked in with Elaine, holding an organized binder, my shoulders straight and my eyes steady. Nathan was already present. He still looked polished with slicked-back hair and a dark blue suit. But there was an unease in his posture. And what I noticed first, his fiancée was no longer with him. The judge reviewed the file Elaine had submitted 3 days prior, which contained the thank you email, account statements, the handwritten ownership draft, and Claire's signed statement. He nodded slightly, then requested the plaintiff to begin. Elaine stood, her voice calm but firm. Your Honor, we are not here today to debate emotions. We are here to present a complete picture that my client, Mrs. Isabella Reed, was not just a wife. She was an integral part of GreenTech's operations from day one, possessing no formal title but undeniable substance. She displayed the numbered exhibits, each appearing on the large courtroom screen, the email stating, "I couldn't do this without you," the transfer receipts, dual-signed proposals, and the 2015 handwritten ownership note. Nathan sat frozen. When Elaine read aloud the June 2016 email in which he said I had saved the company, I observed his hand gripping the side of the chair. There were no more smug smiles or whispered side comments, just a tense silence. Stretched taut. Nathan's lawyer stood to object, claiming the documents lacked legal weight and could have been fabricated, but the judge did not dismiss them outright. This court requires time to verify authenticity, he stated. If these are valid, they hold considerable weight, Elaine continued. We have also contacted former employees from GreenTech's early days, individuals who can confirm that Mrs. Reed was more than a homemaker. She coordinated orders, managed vendors, and dealt with operational issues firsthand. A man in his early 40s, Mark Evans, former warehouse operations staff, took the witness stand. He wore a plain gray shirt, his calloused hands showing years of manual labor. I remember Ms. Isabella clearly, he said. Whenever an order went awry, she was the one in the warehouse checking boxes. Nathan rarely appeared. We used to call her the shadow boss because, honestly, she was the only one who kept things moving. Next was testimony from Hannah Liu, a former intern who is now a communications director at another firm. She confirmed that I trained her step by step, from handling suppliers to customer responses. Their testimonies were like hammers cracking through the shell Nathan's legal team had constructed. The judge called a 30-minute recess to deliberate and ordered GreenTech to submit internal records from 2015 to 2018. As Nathan left the courtroom, his shoulders slumped, his eyes stripped of confidence. He leaned toward his lawyer and whispered something, but I no longer cared. I had told my truth, and for the first time, someone was listening. During the break, Elaine handed me a bottle of water. You're shifting the entire case, Isabella. I shook my head gently. I'm just recounting the life I lived. She smiled. Not everyone possesses the courage to transform memories into evidence, but you did. When court resumed, the judge announced that a broader investigation would be initiated to verify the legitimacy of the funds I transferred to the company, including appointing an independent audit to examine questionable transactions. Nathan's face turned pale. A week after the hearing, Elaine summoned me to her office after work. Her voice was steady, but there was something sharper behind it, like a blade waiting to be drawn. Patrick sent the supplemental audit results, she said as I walked in. And this time, it's not just careless reporting, it's intentional concealment. I sat down, my stomach tightening as she laid out the printed pages. Documents showing GreenTech's financial transactions from the 3 years leading up to the divorce. He transferred over $120,000 into an account under a shell company, Northbridge Solutions, LLC, based in Delaware, just 6 weeks before the divorce papers were filed. Elaine pointed to the detailed breakdown. I was stunned. "What's Northbridge?" "Nothing," she replied. "We investigated it. It has no employees, no business activity. It's merely a placeholder, a means to hide funds, to reduce the value of shared assets before the division." I clenched my fists. That was money I once believed was part of our shared resources, built from our collective effort. Our sleepless nights budgeting and marketing using my own credit cards. I never imagined he would quietly drain the account before leaving me to appear in court like a freeloader. Patrick uncovered one more surprise, buried deep in a mislabeled internal folder, likely hidden within the accounting system deliberately. It was a file titled 2015 Capital Advance Personal, clearly documenting an $18,750 transfer from my personal account to the company's, used to pay for the first equipment order with our supplier. That transaction was never disclosed in any of GreenTech's financial statements during the asset division. "Do you recall making this transfer?" Elaine asked. I nodded slowly. He said there was an issue with his bank. I withdrew money from my savings so he could sign the contract early. And then I didn't think about it again. Elaine crossed her arms, her expression tightening. But he thought about it, and he recorded it. He just never shared it with anyone. That same afternoon, Elaine filed a motion to expand the financial investigation, attaching the newly collected evidence. The judge accepted the motion, and for the first time, I saw him look at me with thoughtful eyes instead of detached indifference. He ordered Nathan's team to submit all financial records dating back to 2015, including correspondence with his personal financial advisors, within 7 days. At the next hearing, I was no longer the one being questioned. I was the one awaiting answers. Nathan arrived late, looking exhausted, his tie loose, with dark circles under his eyes. His lawyers scrambled to organize papers as Elaine began presenting the new findings to the court. "Your Honor," she began, "we are not only outlining the concrete contributions my client made in building this company, but we are also presenting evidence that the defendant intentionally concealed marital assets by moving funds into an offshore account disguised as a shell company." The opposing side objected, but the judge ignored them and addressed Nathan directly. "Mr. Dalton," he said, his voice sharp. "Why was there a transfer from the company's account to Northbridge Solutions just 6 weeks before the divorce filing?" Nathan stammered. I was advised that it was a reasonable way to manage cash flow." "And the funds, Mrs. Isabella, transferred to the company in 2015. Did you acknowledge those?" I don't quite recall." Elaine stepped forward and placed a thick document binder on the judge's bench. "Then what is this, an internal company file clearly listing the transaction amount and sender as Isabella Reed?" No further objections. Just a long, heavy silence ensued. The judge leaned back in his chair and set down his pen. "The court will consider placing a temporary hold on Mr. Dalton's assets until the financial investigation is complete." Nathan lowered his head to the table, and for the first time in months, I exhaled fully. News of our case spread faster than I anticipated. A local business publication ran a feature on the divorce lawsuit, referring to compelling evidence that shifted the entire course of a startup separation case. It did not mention me by name, but anyone who knew GreenTech in its early days understood who the unofficial co-founder was. 3 days after the hearing, Elaine received a call from Nathan's attorney. They requested a private meeting, off the record, which we agreed to. The meeting took place in a quiet conference room on the 18th floor of a glass tower. Nathan was there with just his lawyer, both visibly uneasy. Elaine sat calmly beside me, composed as if she already knew exactly what would be said. "We're offering a one-time payment of $780,000, Nathan's lawyer began. "In exchange, your client agrees to waive any co-founder claims and to keep the matter private." I did not need to hear more. I turned to Elaine and gently shook my head, and she understood immediately. "No," she said firmly. "My client is not looking for a payout in exchange for silence. She wants the truth formally recognized. That cannot be bargained away." Nathan did not look at me. For the first time, he had nothing to argue, nothing to pretend. I remembered those nights when we folded flyers in our living room, and he would joke that someday he would write a memoir and dedicate the first page to me. Now, when all I wanted was to have my name acknowledged, he tried to erase it, as if I never existed. 1 week later, the final ruling was issued. I was present in court alone this time. Elaine said I did not need to be there, as everything was already clear, but I knew I had to hear it with my own ears. I needed to hear the judge say the words I had waited 3 years for. "The court finds," the judge began, "that Mrs. Isabella Reed made substantial, continuous, and systematic contributions to the formation and growth of green tech." He looked up and straight at me. Although no formal ownership agreement existed, the evidence establishes her role as an unlisted co-founder, and therefore she is entitled to legal recognition. My chest felt like it finally opened up, not from victory, but from finally no longer being a shadow in the story I helped write. The ruling included full reimbursement of the $72,000 in personal funds I had transferred from my savings account, along with additional compensation equal to 28% of the company's value based on the audit report. An amount Elaine had demonstrated matched my operational role in the first 3 years. The court also ordered GreenTech's internal records to be amended to recognize me as one of the original founders, even though I no longer held any shares. I left the courthouse in silence, with no reporters or crowds, but my steps were lighter than ever. That day, when I returned home, there was an envelope on my doorstep with no name. Just a handwritten note, "I owe you an apology." Inside was a small letter from Eliza, Nathan's former personal assistant, the same woman who had once smirked at me in court. I read the documents released by the court. I had no idea the truth had been so twisted. I'm sorry I believed a wrong story. And thank you for not staying silent. I folded the letter and tucked it into the drawer beside my desk, not because I needed the apology, but because I wanted to remember that when one person dares to speak up, another can find the courage to face the truth. A few weeks later, GreenTech quietly removed the entire Founders section from its official website. In the new About Us page, they listed individuals who laid the foundation of the company, and my name, Isabella Reed, appeared first. There were no fireworks, no celebration, just one bolded line, still and silent on the screen. And for me, that was enough. Nearly a year after the ruling, I stood backstage at a conference center in Seattle, holding a stack of notes, my heart surprisingly calm. A young woman in a beige blazer walked over, smiled softly, and clipped a microphone to my collar. "Ms. Isabella, you're on in 15 minutes. The whole room's excited." I nodded in thanks and turned to the mirror. Reflected back was a 39-year-old woman, no longer the forgotten assistant, no longer the wife behind someone else's company. It was me, a woman who had learned how to reclaim her voice and was now sharing that strength with others. The conference theme that day was the forgotten voice and how to reclaim it. As I walked onto the stage, the lights hit my eyes, but I did not blink. I looked out at the audience, young women taking notes, middle-aged women leaning into each other, and even a few men nodding respectfully. No one knew my full story, but they came to hear the truth that too many had once ignored. I was once called irrelevant, unimportant, a burden. I began, my voice steady and clear. But the scariest thing isn't when others diminish you. It's when you start believing they're right. I spoke about my journey, from late-night contract writing to draining my savings account, from courtroom dismissals to the moment a judge read my name as a co-founder. I did not aim to make anyone cry. I just wanted them to understand one thing. Silence is never the way to hold on to who you are. When I finished, the room rose in applause. A young woman came up and hugged me tightly. I was about to leave my startup, she said, because everyone said women don't belong. But thanks to you, I'm not walking away. That night I returned to my hotel, opened my laptop, and stared at the words I had just typed, Read and Rise Consulting because your voice builds foundations. I had not decided to start a company just yet, but I knew this time the dream would not be borrowed, and my name would be the first one signed. 3 months later, I officially launched Read and Rise Consulting, a small but ambitious firm dedicated to helping women navigate startups, financial disputes, and the kinds of legal situations they once feared facing alone. My first client was a single mom named Danielle, whose ex-boyfriend had taken full control of the profits from the cafe they opened together. After hearing her story, I looked her in the eyes and said, I've stood exactly where you are, and we're walking out of it together. I did not just work. I started writing. My pieces on invisible labor, uncredited intellectual ownership, and the importance of clear agreements from the start were shared thousands of times. A small business journal called me the woman redefining unofficial contributions in startups. I did not give interviews. I just kept going. Quietly. Because I knew it was not my name that needed to be heard, but the lived experiences of thousands of women who had been erased from the dreams they helped build. One late autumn afternoon, I returned to my office after signing a new project and found a bouquet on my desk with no card, just a small handwritten note. Thank you for not staying silent, for going first and clearing a path for those still afraid to stand. Ja t'aime. I did not know who J.M. was, but I smiled because I understood sometimes the biggest win does not happen in court. It happens when your story becomes the reason someone else starts theirs. On a winter afternoon, while I was editing a presentation for an upcoming seminar in Denver, Elaine called. You're not going to believe what just happened, she said, her tone playful. I put her on speaker while still typing. You know I've learned not to be surprised anymore. Well then, what if I told you? Nathan just resigned as CEO of Green Tech. I froze. For a moment, the room felt still, as if sound itself had disappeared. Official reason is personal stress and a desire to focus on himself, Elaine continued. But word is the board's internal audit and extra financial reviews had a lot to do with it. I did not feel triumphant. Honestly, I just sat there, watching the soft light stream through the white curtain, and felt something deep, not victory, but closure. I never wanted him to fall. I just wanted to be acknowledged for being there. And now, I did not need words to prove it. The actions spoke louder. From a company that once denied my role to hundreds of messages filling the inbox at Read and Rise. One of them was from Juliet, a schoolteacher in Wisconsin. She wrote, "I used to think I shouldn't ask for anything because people told me I was just a wife. But after reading your article on invisible contributions, I spoke up when my husband tried to sell our home without asking. Your lawyer was right. When one person speaks, others find the courage to live honestly." I printed that letter and pinned it beside my desk, not out of pride, but to remind myself that this path I walked was not just for me. Every time I share my story, someone asks, "Do you ever regret not speaking up sooner?" And I always answer honestly, "Yes, but I'd regret it more if I had stayed silent forever." I used to think my worth only existed if someone else acknowledged it, but in the end, I realized it was never gone. It had just been buried under raised eyebrows, dismissive looks, and sweet words meant to keep me behind the curtain. And I, out of love, out of trust, out of fear of conflict, once accepted that not anymore. Because the truth, no matter how long it is buried, rises like spring water from the earth. I did not write a book. I did not want to be anyone's role model. I just told a story many women have lived but never dared to say out loud. I never mentioned Nathan by name in any of my talks, not out of avoidance, but because I knew people would not remember me for who denied me. They would remember me for choosing not to deny myself. Near the end of the year, I returned to the old house in North Portland, the one Nathan and I lived in during our early years. The new owners had remodeled most of it, but the white fence was still there. I stood at the gate for a long time. I did not knock. I just looked. I used to think that place was my ending. Now I understand it was just a pause. On the drive home, I rolled down the window. The wind was cold but calming, and I smiled. There was no more bitterness, just release. I know I cannot turn back time, but I can keep moving forward, day by day, with the belief that my voice has weight, and the truth I held on to was never meaningless. Some wounds never heal the way people expect, but some scars, when acknowledged, become badges. And I carry mine not to show off, but to remind myself I walked out of the shadows, not with hatred, but with the light I made for myself. Isabella's story is proof of a truth that never changes. Real worth does not lie in titles or outside recognition. It lies in one's conviction and belief in themselves. Despite being dismissed, overlooked, or erased, she chose to rise, not for revenge, but to reclaim her voice and dignity. In a world where silence was once considered safe, Isabella showed that sometimes speaking up is what opens the door to true freedom. What do you think of Isabella's journey? Have you witnessed or experienced something similar? Share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to follow the channel for more powerful, emotional stories about life and family.